All right, all right. We are here Monday night with my buddy Kito Bovenschulte. How we doing tonight, Kito?
Oh man, thanks for having me on here.
Of course, man. Appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to nerd out over Ableton a little bit.
Pleasure. It's my what better to do on a Monday night, you know?
Excellent. Yep, couldn't agree more. So those of you who don't know who Kito is, give him a little introduction just based off of my history. We've been playing together for probably throughout a decade, better part of a decade, in just
Yeah.
various projects like live performance. We've done some studio projects, our current band Microcave together. Keto's been an active member of Particle forever. If you want to give a little bit of history and something quick, run down some of the projects you're in or anything you want to plug off the bat. By
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously Micro Cave. This is probably what, our fourth year, going into our fourth year together in Micro Cave, which is pretty awesome. Um, yeah, Particle that I've been with since 2016. A little less active as we have been previously these days, but some of the more active projects that I am involved with right now include Peak from Brooklyn.
shout out.
Going back to Ficus from the early days. We just got together and did a reunion show in September, which was pretty awesome to play those songs again after so many years. So might see a little something of that coming down the pipeline, in the future. Who knows?
Excellent.
Yeah, yeah, and just various other things, recording work, and freelance gigs, whoever needs a drummer.
Right. And
My buddy Chris Stiletto, the rock project we have, releasing new music pretty often, me and him together. New singles on the way actually within the next couple of weeks. So yeah, lots of new music coming out, man.
that's super dope. And you play in you do wedding gigs and stuff like that, like bigger I guess you could say events of that nature.
Yeah, yeah, I do some weddings too.
Excellent.
That's certainly not my forte, but
For sure.
whatever music is being thrown my way, I'll usually say yes unless it's like really shitty. So
Absolutely.
and
Yeah, you're
sometimes
in
even the really shitty gigs I'll still take if I have nothing else on the calendar because I like to play, I just like to
absolutely. And I wanted to kind of mention your wide range of projects because of I always appreciated that you as a drummer and others have expressively to me how you're incorporating Ableton into your live performance and your basically it's a part of your drum rig at this point. You have it um, from my point of view, down to a pretty dope little science. You got a nice little rig going that doesn't require much from admirably from the sound engineer or the venue in the sense of you have your own basically monitoring system and your computer, which will, just allows the whole band to sync to you. You have it all kind of going on. So I wanted to dive in a little bit more in depth into your setup today. Um,
totally, man, totally can break it all down. A lot of moving parts, which took a lot of trial and error over the years. There's always trial and error. I mean, I've been using this kind of technology for almost a decade now. I think 2016 is when I really started to integrate it into
yeah,
most of my
tell me a bit
life.
about how you kind of what got you started into incorporating a computer into your rig? Like what made you make that jump?
So, I had just gotten the particle gig in 2016. And at that time, the first year, excuse me, the first year or so, I wasn't running stuff with the computer yet. I was really just, running backing tracks from the Roland SPDSX drum pad. But it was a much more labor intensive process because I was using the Roland SPDSX has a click track built right into it,
Right.
but it doesn't sync to a track unless you load like a click wave bounce to the drum pad with the backing track, and you have to
Oh,
sync them
wow.
up. And then I would have to split the routing so that, the front of house is getting the backing tracks and I'm the only one getting the click. So it wasn't the most ideal way to do it, but at the time, that's the only way I knew how to do it. So
Right.
that's what I was doing. And there was a lot of times, idiosyncrasies I would notice, I mean, if the click track and the backing tracks were not totally tight, and quantized together, it just wasn't polished and it wasn't ideal. And then there was another band I was playing with at the time too, that we were doing some backing track stuff, and the producer that I was working with, decided, he was like, "Hey, why don't we start messing around with some Ableton?" And so really, the band was called What's Black is White. It was this like big 8, 9 person band that had a lot of different elements to it. It didn't end up doing too much, honestly. We did a lot of studio work that never even got released. I'll spare you that story. Anyways, um, so the live stuff, we were basically using the backing tracks that we recorded for the, recorded studio music, and then putting them into Ableton so that we would play along with them as most bands do these days, right? And that was the first time I really actually started kind of meshing Ableton with the computer and the drum pad at that time too. And then I really started to kind of integrate it more with Particle over the next year or two. And I did not know what I was doing at
So if I
all.
understand correctly, I mean, you used it as a kind of solution to get it out of having to upload an entire track onto the SPDX, SX, I apologize. Um, you would have to upload the entire backing track onto that, as well as audio of the click that would sync up to that and have them play simultaneously, just
Yeah,
in order to have a backing track on a click. Like
that's how I did it first time. Yeah.
that
It,
sounds like a pretty fire solution.
yeah, it's not great.
Yeah. No, and I
You know,
feel like
it
that
worked.
it's such a common thing in today's kind of technology and standard with a lot of live performances to kind of have that click. And but it is somewhat, I feel, a mystery to a lot of people just how that's even achieved. Like, how is everyone locking these effects in time? How are you sending a click? How are you monitoring? But it's all pretty achievable, and that's what I admire about your kind of setup is that you kind of have that use down in a different way than myself, for example, where I'm for the doing a lot of like kind of sound design or just track production. Not to say you don't, which you do as well, I've seen. But the way you use it in a live performance is super efficient, I feel.
Thanks, man. I mean, I appreciate that as somebody who directly gets to work with the technology, right? When we are running this stuff from Microcave, we're all benefiting from the convenience and the efficiency that Ableton does have to offer. And, I mean, we're not, this is not an advertisement for Ableton, but we're just speaking about how useful the program is for us and what we use it for. And to think about what I used to do, right, with having to upload the waveforms to the drum pad itself and split the routing and adjusting the audio levels sometimes after I had already uploaded them, all that stuff, like when I think about the headache that I went through doing that to how seamless and easy it is now using Ableton, I mean, it's night and day. I can program a set change in the middle of a set if I want to. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Where previously I had to like do so much work before, just to get the show ready. And we can do a little breakdown too of how I arrange the show specifically
Yeah, we'll
in.
dive into that. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
want to real quick. I pulled up for those who aren't familiar, the we got the Roland SPDSX sample pass. This is what Kito. You could see it from your end, correct?
That's it. Yeah.
Oh, 4 out of 4.8 stars. I mean, come on. Um, but so
It,
this is what
and
Kito was initially using before you had a DAW to kind of be able to drag and drop those tunes in and have that built-in click and tempo change and make automation, all of that. I mean, it's such a sick machine, though. I mean, it's a standard.
It's an amazing machine, and I still currently use the SPDSX. It's just now, it's the interface for the DAW,
So
and
your chain is starting with this essentially
yeah, essentially, it goes from the DAW to the SPDSX.
via
Uh,
MIDI out.
yes, and then I have another drum pad that the Alesis pad, which is synced to the MIDI on the DAW. So the that one, yep, that one controls the DAW, so I can kind of just hit things. I can hit the pads with the sticks.
You're using this more of like a trigger in a way than an actual sampler. Like this is
Correct.
essentially
I'm
your
not. Yeah,
MIDI
I'm not using
keyboard.
any audio at all from the Alesis. It's just strictly trigger pads. Yeah, so there's no audio that even comes out of that drum pad when I use it on stage, but
Right.
it's great, man. I mean, this thing, I can just, I assign the MIDI, activity to the MIDI action to a specific pad. If it's, start, stop, click on, click off, launch scene, whatever it's going to be, I've got all those pads to kind of create a template, that I can maneuver around since I've always got my hands occupied.
That's excellent. I
Yeah.
love I love that you're using the two pads for those two separate reasons. Because I've seen drummers also use the kind of like the finger launch pads that are also great. But I feel like as a drummer to be able to just have this all MIDI mapped and know what each pad is kind of do and they each serve a function to you outside of producing the sounds themselves. I think I love that for a drummer. That seems like the route for launching MIDI, I guess, or
Yeah,
something.
man. I've tried a couple different variations. The Launchpad is great. Like you have much more, you have a lot more to work with on the Launchpad. There's so many more assignable functions, and it's constructed, specifically for Ableton. So the Launchpad is great, but I just found that like if I'm, in the middle of something, I'm playing something musical, and I need to like adjust the tempo, tempo shift up or down, or I need to like launch a new clip that needs to
Mhm.
come in for this section, instead of like, using my finger on the launch pad or even the MIDI keyboard, I have that little
Yeah,
Akai K2 Mini that I sometimes bring out and I sometimes still use in tandem with all of this other stuff. But that is also same thing. It's like if I'm hitting pads with my fingers, it's not as accessible as if I can just hit it with a stick. I don't have to really break the groove. I can literally just, move one hand over, hit it. It's queued up to start the next bar line, and then we're in. So
yeah. You
it's
don't want to
just
have to make sacrifices, but like you don't have to sacrifice your drumming to like go in and which works for some people. But yeah, I can see how this will just kind of keep the flow of everything and allow you to even stay in time, keep not have to switch from entire arms to fingers, like very
yeah.
intuitive. Um,
I just figured, if I'm sacrificing the quality of the musical performance to mess around with the technology, then I'm doing a disservice to the performance itself. This is supposed to enhance and facilitate,
sure.
right? What I'm trying to do. And if I'm sacrificing, oh shit, I just missed that snare drop, that hit because I had to do something over here with the computer. You know what I mean? Like they have to even out, they have to balance out in some way. So I don't want this whole electronics world to be taking my attention away from the actual drum kit.
Right.
I want them both to be supported equally. And this has been the best way that I've been able to do that.
Absolutely, dude. And you mentioned you also had that MK2 Mini in your rig.
I do. So with that, those are a little bit more specific functions, like I'm not playing any MIDI keyboard stuff, but
Sure.
you can assign the notes to specific functions in Ableton. So the ones I use mostly are these pads up top, right? So like I've assigned those pads to different input channels on my Ableton,
Hmm.
So like, and I can show you on a screen share too, but like I
Yeah.
have one of those. If I didn't want to launch an entire scene, the way I have it all stacked and organized, and if I wanted to just like launch one clip that's in a specific input, I can assign the inputs to each one of those pads, and I can kind of just move around the scene quickly, and still use the stick to trigger the clip, but it kind of helps me just get to where I need to go.
Does that trigger? Because I feel like I had the older model of it. Does that allow you to move around the scene?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I can move
Oh,
around.
so it's like a little joystick type thing.
Well, the joystick I don't use. I actually haven't tried to use that, but that's a good
But
idea.
is that what that on the top left?
Yeah, that thing.
So is that to be able to or can you use it to kind of go from channel to channel or track to track? Like say you wanted to move that section of pads, or is it just kind of specifically MIDI mapped?
I've only specifically MIDI mapped the pads themselves because, when you get into those things with like relative and absolute value in the MIDI mapping, certain functions in the DAW have to equate to whatever MIDI function is the capability of that on the module you're using, right? So like
Mhm.
with something like that, I probably would have tried to use it at some point, but I don't think you can use it like a mouse pad. I think you have to designate it to a specific function, specifically, not just kind of like clicking around. So what I use is the pads. That's just like, input channel one, input channel two, input channel three, and I can hit that, and then all of a sudden my scene is automatically on input channel three, and then I can just like scroll down with the drum pad. If I hit two clicks down to the clip that I need to get to, and then I can launch it from there, as opposed to like, scrolling through the entire scene on the DAW. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So you're using these two things to launch they have their own kind of MIDI jobs.
Correct. Yeah, it's a
That-
great way to put it. They
That's
they both
awesome.
have specific jobs. So
So
that
with this, maybe if I'm understanding correctly, you were like, this isn't to like enable and turn on and off tracks, or are you arming with this one specifically, or are you enabling? I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. But turning on channels with these,
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, I'm turning channels on, or at least just assigning the next scene launch to the specific channel that I'm planning to use, right? So,
okay.
if I'm going like, I have my
So
DAW
you're
set up.
launching
Yeah.
samples essentially with those, like you're launching the clips with those.
Yeah, more or less. It's helping me get to the channel in the DAW that I need to access the sample. So,
Okay.
if I kind of have it like in five or six different channels within the DAW. So I have like my MIDI drum kits in the first channel. Then I've got like MIDI samples in the second one. And then the four after that are kind of layers. And I'll show you once we get into the specifics of the screen sharing, but
Yeah.
they're layers. Like, so if I have like layer one just might be like a little hi-hat top or like a tambourine top, something light, that's kind of just out there. It's not like any heavy sampling. The second layer might be like, okay, now here's a clap on two and four, right? So I bring that in, and then you have this like, percussive hi-hat tambourine top sound with now a clap. Layer three might be an electronic kick. So if we're doing some kind of four on the floor jam and I want to trigger, like a 909 or something, some kind of sub bass kick that's going to mirror my acoustic kick, that'll be layer three. So using those drum pads on the MK2 will help me get from like layer one to layer two to layer three or layer
Uh,
four. And then I can launch that scene with the Alesis.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like they all have different jobs. They all have different ways of communicating with the DAW specifically. And that's just kind of the easiest, way that I've gotten all the technology to work together and been able to do things the way I need to do them. Because like I said, I went through a lot of trial and error trying to figure out what worked best and what was not working. And I won't set the MK2 Mini up all the time, depending on the level of, you know, activity within Ableton that I'm doing. Something like with Microcave, I'll set it up, depending. But sometimes I'll just go and program the show anyways. Like I know if it's going to be a shorter, like, all right, here we're doing an hour. Here's our hour set. I'll program the whole hour, and I just know I'm going to use these clips at this time, and I'll just put them in order so I'm not like jumping all around. But if we're doing like 3 hours, we have 3 hours of time to fill, and we're doing lots of improvisation and taking lots of risks, then I want to have access to the full library of sounds that I have in the DAW, which is much more than I might use in a 60-minute performance, right? So if I want the full access, then I kind of just scroll all the way down to the bottom of the DAW, and I have like my bulk load of clips that I just can pull up at any time that don't have a specific musical home, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we can definitely dive in a little bit into your Ableton session template. I definitely have some questions if you're down. But my first question would be, do you have a default template that you are essentially programming new shows for or on so that you're opening a template and it has all of your saved settings and whatnot, and you're just kind of dragging I don't know, and making those automation changes? Are you, Mike? So in short, do you have a default template you've kind of created, like your master live template, for any sort of show situation?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the default template, I would say, has become kind of whatever the last working template that I use. So, like, I have different sessions for different projects. Like, I have a microcave template, which is what I have pulled up now. I've got a template for peak. I've got a particle template. I just built a ficus template for this show that we
That's
did. It
great. I love
was
that.
really cool because I never had one that predated the Ableton era. So that was really cool to get to build. I built a lot of new samples and stuff for the ficus show specifically that probably may not use anywhere else because there's like parts of the song compositions, but that was really fun to make. And so yeah, I mean, like whatever the default template is kind of ever evolving. But if I start a new session, then I drag everything over from the previous session, and I'll just like rename the track names. You know what I mean? So like, with Microcave, I have our track names with the BPM and the time signature and all that stuff. And like, if I'm not going to bring the Microcave track names into a particle show, I'll delete the Microcave tracks and then I'll save all the other stuff, so that it's all kind of ever evolving. And I have access to everything that I've done up to this point.
Yeah, and I've noticed that within our, like, even our own live performances, like there's been either I'll hear my own isolated vocal track over my own that you're launching, or you'll kind of launch an old sample that we've used in a different context. So that does make sense that you kind of have the microcave template, so you have all your microcave stuff in front of you, but you're able to kind of reshape and format the set, and you're able to kind of automate the tempo changes and kind of get everything really locked in. So that's what I've always appreciated. You kind of, as your bass player, just the ability to, I guess not rely, but you're definitely driving the ship. You're definitely driving the ship as far as technological capabilities, monitoring capabilities to a degree. You could send us that click. I mean, it can be done, but every band would be lucky to have a Kito for sure.
Man, you're too kind. You're too kind.
No, and for sure, it's impressive stuff to be seen done as a drummer for sure, and just kind of. I love seeing Ableton utilized in ways that I'm not totally like out of my comfort zone, or just something that I don't. It's awesome. But
Thanks, man.
without further ado, if you wanted
Yeah,
to. Want to
sure.
take us under the hood?
Let's go under the hood, baby.
Um, so we don't we have some audio and things kind of plugged in. I know you're in
Yeah.
your spot, so but so what do we got going on here, my man?
All right, so let's just kind of do a quick rundown of this is the microcave template. You'll recognize a lot of these song names, I'm sure. So this is again, kind of ever evolving. And basically, this has become the default template for how I build any show. So again, like whether it's microcave, if it's particle, if it's ficus, if it's stiletto, like for anything that's going to require live improvisation, this is going to be it. And I would say Peak and Microcave get the most use out of this kind of setup because we do a lot of jamming, right? So all of the layers that I was talking about or backing tracks live over here. And I'll just start from the top, make it easy. And I want to give a quick shout out to my man Jules Jensen, also, who is a Ableton guru, and he's really the guy who kind of opened up this door for me and like the possibilities of what I still currently do. So I
Yeah.
just want to give a shout out to him because he is, like I said, a wizard and he's incredibly knowledgeable. And he really showed me how to do a lot of the things that I still use today, in terms of at least setting MIDI kits and things like that. So, I put all of these MIDI drum kits on a chain, and all that does is, I have this drum kit selector. I'll go up here. I've got 6 different kits here, just some basic kits that I can use on the SPDSX. So the
So if I
SPDSX,
can pause you really quick,
yeah,
some of our kind of drummers, who might be newer to Ableton or just maybe people who aren't even using Ableton like this, can you show us what one of your kit kind of looks like? How do you make a kit? Because I know on Ableton there's a few different ways you can kind of put together a drum kit, but or what type of MIDI instrument are you using to build your kit?
yeah, totally. So these are actually all Ableton kits. These are pre-saved kits that came with Ableton, and
Nice.
I was just kind of bouncing around, the library and seeing what kits I liked in the early days, and these are just very basic kits. I don't know if I have access to them at the moment because I don't have the MIDI plugged in, but
But you're on
uh,
Ableton 12 now, correct?
I am, yeah, yeah.
Nice. So there's probably, even they just get more and more in depth with their like individual kit design as far as isolating the instruments and going in and really tweaking each sound. They've really been
You can
upping.
do a
Yeah.
You can you can cut and splice and put effects on specific sounds. For these kits specifically, the MIDI kits. I'm really just these are just like accessory. Like I have a couple other options in addition to the custom kits that I build on the SPDSX. So the SPDSX, I do most of like the kit building. That makes sense. A lot of the samples that I've either made or have gotten from somewhere else will go onto the SPDSX specifically. It gets hard uploaded uh, onto the pads chip. These MIDI kits are kind of just like a bonus for me. It's like, okay, if I ran out of ideas on the kits that I have on the SPDSX, and I'm like, oh, you know what? Let's go use one of these kind of kits. I can pull them up, and I can just, I can pull up the MIDI kit that I have designated to that channel on the drum pad. Does that make sense? So
Yeah, so
I have
you're basically I guess you could say a sign like assigning or mapping the Roland to each kit.
correct. Yeah. So
So the sounds are coming from Ableton, but are mapped to the Roland.
for these 6 kits specifically, yeah.
Yeah.
So for these 6 kits, I just have one MIDI channel. It's a global MIDI channel designated on the SPDSX. So when you run the MIDI from Ableton to the drum pad, it's receiving the MIDI information that I've designated these kits. So I can just kind of flip through each one and pull up the designated kit that I want when I'm not using the kits that are on the Roland to begin with. So,
Can
like
you
I said, it's kind
show
of
can you show kind of or pull that screen up to show your drum kit inside? Like what is contained inside, what type of drum instruments? I see them, they're kind of dark there.
that's what I was saying. I think because I don't have the MIDI plugged in at the moment.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
But
yeah.
so we'll just do it off the cuff. But generally speaking, these are just this is a standard 808 kit that's a little bit different than the 808 kit that I built on the SPDSX. This one is kind of just like some weird down tempo, glitchy kind of sounds. Uh, this one is also kind of similar to an 808, but it's a little weirder. So they're kind of just like uh, just variations of stuff that I already have.
Right, like, but I'm assuming a lot of this is like it's percussive stuff. I'm seeing like a lot of claps. You got some chord,
Yeah.
maybe one shots, percussion, some stick stuff,
Yep. Yep.
hi-hat stuff.
Exactly.
Nice.
It's just percussive samples, fun stuff to sprinkle in,
Cool.
There's not any samples or loops, I should say, rather coming from this. It's just simply like one shots to layer in a little texture.
And
So
that's what seems to be cool about why people go with the Roland SPD SX because it is use it as a sampling pad. So you have kind of the option to use it as a MIDI controller or a sampling pad. Because I feel like there's been other models of the Roland SPD that you that don't have that chip per se. So you would have to
yeah,
be that are only MIDI controllers, even kind of like your Elisa's. But so this is cool to be that kind of multi-functioning MIDI controller and be able to store samples directly on it, and it comes with its own sample banks, I'm sure.
yeah, man, yeah. I
Uh,
mean, like the possibilities are just endless, So
so
if I want to pull up, some new stuff, I have to kind of go in there and hardwire, like, I have to add another kit to the chain, and create a MIDI home for the new kit. But otherwise, all this stuff is just usually ready to go. If I want to use it, it's there. I turn on the MIDI, over here when it's plugged in, and I have access to it. And besides that, um, the only other MIDI stuff that I'm running that when it's not, functional mapping is I have a couple, MIDI clips here. Not that many but just a few like that I'll I can just kind of trigger those if I need to. But most of the stuff that I am doing on a regular basis is I'm just using the freaking click track. It's like I'm just like
yes.
I'm I'm trying to keep the whole show on the click track as within reason. Like if there's moments of more natural musical performance where it's not supposed to be so rigid, I'll come off of it and then try to jump us back on somewhere. But anywhere that I think I'm going to be using samples or, trying to just keep a tighter musical performance for myself and for the rest of the band, I'm programming that shit right into the grid here. So this is
Right.
probably our last sets, that we did. I'm just programming the first song on the grid. I didn't really trigger anything for that. At least I didn't have anything preset. I may have scrolled down here at any point in that jam and decided to cue something up. I mean, these are all the layers I was talking about.
So
You
you're
know,
able to go into that's what's really cool. In your main channel, you're able to basically go through your whole catalog of microcave songs. And I'm sorry to jump around a bit, but just something super sick there on the right. You're able to literally just basically choose anything from the microcave catalog, and it'll automate to that tempo on a 4/4 click.
that's correct. Yeah. So
That's super sick.
yeah.
Are you going in and kind of organizing it based on the set list, or do you just kind of scroll through as per the written set list? You know what I mean? Like, are you rearranging those per set list?
Not so much down here. I mean, this all just kind of lives down here. you know,
It's alphabetical, so it's like you could probably just kind of scroll and find it pretty quick.
Yeah, it's just like everything. I know where everything kind of lives within the scene, and it's like if I'm, if I'm basically programming the set over here in the main
Wow,
launch, right?
really
So
cool.
like, I'm programming everything right here, just in terms of what the order of songs is. So if we have the first four songs, like you see here, a Grover Fern sequencer, simpler times ending. Some of those are not all in the same tempo range, so I just go
Yeah.
in there, I automate the tempo changes. So like, we'll get from like whatever 128 to 132. You see how I have a program tempo jump right there. So if we're jamming in 128 here, I can just launch this at a designated point in the music. That gets us up to 132. I can do another one, 32 bars, 64 bars down, down the alley and get us to 136. And then eventually get us to 138, which is where we need to go. And then anything that happens within that time frame, even if I'm not pre-programming any specific scenes over here besides the backing track for the song, right? This is just the verse and chorus harmonies that we've kind of buried in there for sequencer. But like anything that I want to queue up at any given time while we're jamming, I can just kind of scroll down here to my like big bank. And I know it's a little crazy to have to go all the way down here, but sometimes I'll move stuff up. It just depends on what we're doing, how much music has been programmed. So sometimes I'll just, go down to my big bank here and I can pull up anything that I want throughout that moment in time, right? Moment in music.
Nice.
So
In case you
uh,
need your ass clap, you got.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, who doesn't need their ass clap most of the time,
I
right?
have to ask, so what would something be like what would ass clap be? Like why would you have an ass clap in your main tempo bank of your catalog essentially? Like
So
what would
ass
something like
clap,
that be?
yeah, ass clap was I don't know, that was just the designated. All right, let's
So
clear it
so
out.
maybe just a loop of something that you wanted to launch at that tempo.
Exactly. This is just a
Nice.
little, it's a 2 bar loop, you
Right.
know?
And I've noticed within, our performance, something cool that you do, like you said before, a lot of how you're using Ableton, at least in the live performance setting, is keeping that tempo and moving us to where we need to be. Um, but something cool I kind of touched upon before is that you'll you'll utilize what was in the song, I've noticed. Maybe you'll have a loop that'll go from, or a cool drum effect that's going from the song into the jam. So you'll be able to just keep that going. And so the way you use it and launch in and out of clips while keeping us on time is really smooth. Um, like so you have that bank of it looks like loops over there, and you have a couple of different channels of loops.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is all just, a lot of this is layer one, because layer one is kind of it can either be like all you need is that one layer. Like if it's a very uh, intense kind of sample, you don't
Yep.
want that much other stuff, like that one, that's got a lot going on.
Yeah, we're not getting really that audio on ours over here, but
You're not? Oh, interesting.
no. Um, let's see.
Here, let me try again.
Let's see. Audio. We'll work on that for the future sessions. I just wanted to more so get a look, but you're basically able to use the samples for different elements of the same song. Are you implying? So you can layer the songs together, or are you using it just to layer different loops on top of each other?
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything, It's something that could work within songs. If it's a moment of improvisation from one song to the next, it can be a transitionary kind of loop to get us there. A lot of the time I just kind of like to use these as like if it's layer one, it's kind of either like no pun intended, like a launch pad for a future part of the jam. Like it'll set a foundation for us to build on as a 4 piece. Or alternatively, I like it as kind of a reset, like to get us to another level of dynamic. So depending on what the layer is, and
Nice.
I kind of know what I'm looking for when I come down here. It's like,
I'm sure.
it's like you're digging into, you got a tool chest, tool bag, and you're like fishing around. It's like, oh, I know I need this tool. This would be good right now. I can dig in, find that one, pull it out. And then when you're done with it, you put it back, and so it's like I can kind of just come down here and pick what I need. But yeah, it's all various degrees of, percussive tops.
And you got
Uh,
your everything's being sent. It looks like you got your reverb delay return channels. Keep
yeah,
keep
a
it. Do
little bit
you do
there.
you utilize those as well during the live performance?
Not as much live. I just send a little bit of reverb and a little bit of delay, just
Yeah.
blanket, like,
Hey, you're
I don't
on the
necessarily,
click though, so it's cool, and it'll give you a little bit of that ambience. So like all your
yeah,
delays, like for those who maybe aren't aware, but all your delays and effects will be locked onto your click. So if you're producing that sound, the whole band will essentially be on Kito's click, which is the sickest part through our
yeah, yeah.
external MIDI hub. But um,
Totally. And honestly, if I'm doing reverb and delay, I'm usually doing it on the SPDSX. Like it's got an onboard function for shortwave,
sure,
reverb, all that stuff. There's a filter, on there. So like if I'm doing something, it's more musical to me to do it on the drum pad because I can kind of like take my fingers and do it, for real as opposed to messing around in the DAW. So if I'm doing that kind of stuff, I'm
it,
usually doing it on the SPDSX, which is also still MIDI synced to the clock in Ableton. So it's all synced regardless.
I know.
Um, whole
It's
thing.
nice to like it's nice to fantasize about like how much you can really do live with Ableton on the spot, but it's like the more pre kind of you have the more predetermined and how like having a plan and building upon like one template kind of like this, it's like yeah, there's almost so much that you kind of need to hone it in for the live performance. I've learned, you try to do all of the things in one performance, it's not going to quite go as well as if you have, like you said, your own toolbox of instruments and drum racks and whatnot. I
Yeah,
did
man.
want to quickly. Is there anything else you wanted to show us on what is this? Our session view?
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty general rundown. I really don't use the arrangement view too much. I really don't. Like if I'm writing something, I'm in this mode, but I don't ever use it live.
I've seen some, some people have used arrangement views for like pre-record or arranging maybe a live performer's set, like almost like rap. A lot of rappers will utilize this. Actually, like as you mentioned, Jules Jensen, I know he goes on the road with some pretty wild people. Like he was on programming. I'm pretty sure a lot of an arrangement view for like MGK and stuff like that, Lil Wayne. But I've seen it done all on arrangement view if they have their kind of backing tracks, so to speak, and are moving tempos. But in a kind of live setting where you're jamming, I can see it being kind of obsolete in that setting to use this view.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, I'm not hating on the arrangement view by any means, but it's like for me, functionally, I just don't have much use for it when I'm doing everything out of here. Like this is more to me, this is more interpretive. I can use this on the fly, and
Yes,
this would be more for like a program show from downbeat one all the way through the end, right? So
exactly.
if you're building a set that is the same, all the way through, this is probably your workstation, right? Because then
Right.
you're putting notes of on the arrangement of where everything's going to be, and you can automate the various things that you want to automate. So I'm sure this is great for like a pre-recorded set like that.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
for
But in yours,
improvisational stuff, this has been the moneymaker for me. I mean, even for like my other project, Aletto, I don't know if I have it pulled up here, but I'll just tell you about it. So, that's just backing tracks. So there's no improvisation on that. They're 4.5 minute songs with the tracks and everything I do out of the session view also for that. But that's because we've already done all the pre-production and everything's mixed accordingly and bounced out accordingly. So, you know, and we're changing the set too. It's just the tracks stay the same, but then it's like once the backing track and the song itself have been played all the way through, that's it. Song's over, on to the next song. So it's very easy to just like launch song one, song two, song three, song four. But
but
yeah,
it's
different
keeping
people
everyone
bring.
in time, and not everyone has that, and which is, it's not some people, like you said, and I've seen it done plenty of times, are using the SPDSX solely the way you were doing it, or I've even seen people throwing on having like their own MP3 player in their pocket and doing that sort of thing. People are looking for those other ways, but this is they call it Ableton Live for a reason, that
For sure,
intuitive
man, for sure. I've
live.
seen some crazy amalgamations of like guys getting creative doing all the same stuff that I did too, like just finding ways to make it work. And
Oh yeah.
you don't know it until you've had that door open for you, or you start experimenting with it yourself to know how it's going to work for you, you know?
I
So
used to throw Ableton on my computer when I would try to perform with it live. I would throw it. There was one instance specifically, but it was on a bar stool with an one of the old school 1/8 inch auxes just through the computer, and that was my setup. Basically, with like a piece of tape. You know what I mean? Where it's like just so I'm just producing the output from my computer. It was just like such bare bones of like trying to achieve with kind of blindly in a sense without knowing all the capabilities of connectivity, and it's awesome.
yeah, man.
I did want to get into a couple of more things that have always kind of interested me. One of those things is, how are you through Ableton sending a click to the monitors without it being sent to front of house?
Yeah, great question. So, the SPDSX only has the only downside to it is that it only has two main outputs that I can assign that aren't sub outs. So, and with Ableton, you're actually only able to assign the left and right. The new Sample Pad Pro, SPDX Sample Pro, I think is called, has 8 designated outputs, which I am so stoked on. I haven't bought it yet, but I plan to buy it because then I'm gonna avoid the issue that I'm about to go into right now. So,
So
uh,
if I may, so because this only has what, two outputs or on the one you have?
only got the two, so I got to send everything through the left channel, and I send the click through the right channel. Um, there's a lot of ways to get around that. Could have another interface set up with more outputs. I just haven't brought that yet
Do you mind
because
repeating that once more? So with two channels, you're sending it to left and right.
correct. So I'm
What's
sending
going on?
audio. The audio goes to channel one, which goes to front of house. And the click track gets sent to channel two, which is just for my in-ears and anybody else who wants them, right? If we route it to the full band.
And where are
Um,
you sending click from?
the click is coming directly from Ableton. So the click is coming from the DAW here. So everything is being produced. I guess you don't have audio, right? I'm using this click track so that everything on the grid is synced to the grid itself. Um, I wouldn't really mess around with external click tracks if you're triggering everything from Ableton. You want to use the Ableton click so that it's all copacetic. But
But how does
um,
it bypass front of house? So how are
because
you
I'm,
getting?
I'm not sending both audio channels to front of house. I'm only sending if I'm sending the audio to channel one,
Gotcha.
now it's only getting channel one. If I'm
But
sending
does
the
that allow only a mono signal?
in this situation, yes.
Right.
But again, there's ways to get around that. So you
Sure.
have stereo signal, you can set up an interface, which I have done in the past. I don't always do it. And then, or just get, something that has more output capability,
A
which,
mixer, like any mixer with outputs, I guess that you connect and I
right.
guess chain your
Yeah,
your
which I
rig.
do set up also. I do set up a mixer for me. That's like my in-ears mixer.
Right.
Uh, and everything comes direct to me. But in terms of what I don't want the front of house guy to have like post fader. I want him to have pre-fader audio. So, if he's getting the stuff from my mixer, he's getting my adjustments that I'm making for my ears, which I don't want him to have, obviously. So
And
right
that's
now,
similar to, sorry to interrupt, that's similar to like how on a DJ mixer you'll have your cue button, which allows you to hear it through your headphones only, before you hear the track. So you'd be able to essentially, even if you wanted to, I guess, mix in your stuff. You could send it only, you could hypothetically just route it, like you could sample it to yourself before playing it live.
you could. I don't do that only because I know what I'm going to trigger. You know what I mean? But yeah, I mean it works the same way. So for the click track, I'm using the cue out. That is the click track, right? So you know any new tempo that's coming in, that's the cue preview almost. You know what I mean?
Nice.
Once it all locks in and all the tracks and the click have reformed with the new tempo, uh, that's the way I use that. But yeah, I mean, essentially the Q out would for a DJ would work the same way.
And that underneath, just for those, that's where you're controlling your amount of click, that headphone next to that meter down below a little bit.
Down
To the right,
here,
to the right.
over
The,
here.
the solo, blue
Oh
solo.
yeah. This guy. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. So I just honestly, I just have that cranked all the way up because I'm routing the click track into my in-ears mixer anyways, and then I have additional control on the mixer itself. So I just crank this so I can get the most out of the DAW. And then if I need more or less, I can do it right on my little Mackie Mix Pro 8, So
So that's
um
giving you the entire DAW opposed to just the click volume.
uh yeah, because I'm routing the audio directly into my mixer. The same audio that I'm sending to front of house is coming to me direct.
Gotcha.
Uh, So I have direct control over all of that in addition to the click. So click track, I'm getting my ears mixed from the front of house, right? And that's with everything. Then I have my click track is input two. And then I have the direct audio from the DAWs input three. So I can kind of adjust the three different worlds, right? Here's
Yeah.
stage volume, here's click track volume, here is DAW audio. So I can kind of work with all of those individually to make sure I get the best mix that I can give myself.
Right, and that's all essentially controlling your monitor mix. You don't have to touch really much of your input or your output gains or anything like that. Like because you just have so much you have multiple methods of controlling your monitor mix essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, after so many years of disaster, that was kind of the only way to do this and do it efficiently. So,
It's
um,
yeah, it's such a huge part. Even when we all went the in-ear monitor route, we're like, it's night and day in general. So just building upon that ability to hear yourself and control what you hear is most of the battle at this point. Um,
big time, man.
one more thing, if you don't mind, taking a look at some of your preferences and how that's routed across, you know, I guess three different machines, what you're sending your MIDI to. Um, so yeah, if you felt so inclined to give us
Talking about in here. Is that what you had in
yeah,
mind?
a little bit of your MIDI settings, your maybe your audio settings as well, if you're sending and receiving any audio. So I guess while we're on audio, are you in during your live performance? I guess you're not really taking any. Would you be taking the input from your Roland?
Well, actually, technically, I'm sending the output to the Roland.
Correct.
So yeah, so I don't really have an input device because everything that is coming from the Roland is getting the audio directly from Ableton, right? So when I have my SPDSX plugged in, that's the output device, which
So
is
that's your
not
in your interface essentially. It's acting as your interface.
exactly
Right.
exactly. So I'm not sending any audio into the DAW, but I'm sending audio out of the DAW, and I just run it all the way through the Roland SPDSX. Um,
Through USB connectivity.
yeah,
Nice.
exactly. Uh, Buffer size I have set to 512, which seems to work pretty good. I've messed around with a couple different latency functions. I just got brand new MacBook. I
Yeah.
think
So you
I
should be able
am.
to run a pretty low buffer size, which is nice.
Yeah. I spent all this money on, I forget what I got, the M2 or M3 or something. So,
Hell yeah.
I just, I had this old ass, 2016 MacBook Pro that was getting jammed up. And I bought this new one. Everything runs pretty smoothly so far. So I've been kind of rocking that 512. The MIDI stuff, again, when I have it plugged in, you can see more, but you can just kind of pick the control surface. So if I'm using,
So you're using, I feel like I rarely have to use that control surface kind of drop down. I'm usually using my input and output board. So I'm curious as to how you're kind of utilizing this part of that drop down.
Yeah, so generally, if I'm using this, like once you plug in the MIDI stuff, right? So if I plug in the Alesis, it'll come up in here, right? It'll
Right.
come up in ports. And if I uh don't sync the Alesis with the DAW, I think once you do it once, I don't think you have to do it again after that. But I was having some issues where things weren't triggering the way that I had intended for them to be triggered. So I think I just had to sync and use it as it was like remote control. So I was able to give the drum pad command over the DAW, if that makes sense. So I had to basically just get the DAW and the drum pad, the module on the same page. And that's what these functions are down here. That's what they're used for. Like I'll just pull up, so I'll show you. So like with the MIDI, the way I don't know if we talked about this too much, but I'll do it quickly. So it's like the way that that is all mapped is, these channels, like I said, you can see up here, that's all designated to one of the drum pads, or one of the MK2 mini pads. So like, this is the MK2 mini. Up here is all of the like launch, play, stop, click on, click off, automation, all that stuff. Those are the drum pad functions. So in order to like get a clip to play that I needed to play, I had to map this to that specific drum pad. And to go back to the settings, in order to do that, I had to make sure that the computer and the drum pad were talking to each other basically. Because they don't talk to each other automatically. You kind of have to like
Is
introduce
that
them.
what you're essentially, is that what you would kind of use that drop down, the control surface drop down for? So like send to allow the machines to kind of communicate with each other better by
Exactly. Exactly.
nice.
So the first time that I tried to do that, it wasn't working, and I think after some research, just figured out that that's what I had to do. So like I said, you just gotta like get them to shake hands and introduce each other, and then they kind of have a knowing of once they're reconnected again, they're like, oh yeah, I remember you. So that's what I use that down there for, and then I mean everything else I don't do.
Are you going MIDI through from your I guess would it be you're going from your Roland to the Alesis to what is the chain order going?
So the MIDI information is sent to both drum pads at the same time. And that's connected through USB, computer to USB. So it's
Gotcha.
receiving the MIDI information from the DAW that way. If I'm sending MIDI information out to other devices or other parties, other people in the band, that is just a MIDI out from the Roland, because the Roland that's where all the tempo information is being sent.
Right,
So
right.
if I need to send you the MIDI information so that you can sync your base station to my click track, we're using the MIDI out of the drum pad. Uh,
So the rest of the band is going essentially MIDI through, but you have isolated USB cables, so you're not basically daisy chaining the MIDI across machines. You're going out from your machine separately into the two other drum pads.
yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. And then
And
all of your MIDI info being sent out is coming from the Roland.
correct,
Got it.
correct.
Cool, man. Love
Yeah,
it.
man. A lot of cool shit you can do.
That's for sure. We've only scratched it's wild after like over a decade. It feels like sometimes you're like, I don't know. You're not that you don't know shit, but you're always learning kind of
I
new
mean, dude,
way,
there's
new way
so
to
much.
interact.
Yeah, there's so much more about this program that I know I do not know, that I'm just always exploring. I'm always kind of just like figuring stuff out, like cool new tricks to use. And it's a rabbit hole, man. I mean,
Yeah.
but kudos to Ableton for being able to develop such a creative product. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
just
it gives
it's
us nerds a hobby.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
Um,
like, when people ask me, you know, the difference, like why I like Ableton versus, another DAW, it's like, well, Ableton is by far and away the best for live performance. You know what I mean? Like, Logic and Pro Tools are great, but I wouldn't use those in a live setting. Studio is one thing, but like I don't know, this program I'm comfortable with now more than any other program. It's the quickest program that I could use efficiently. Um, and it went from being the hardest and the least efficient for me just because of my skill level within the program itself to now being the most efficient and probably my most skilled program to date. So it's just funny how the shift happens. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, man. Yeah, no, and it seems like, I learn about some people really just are so much more familiar with other DAWs, but are using it for kind of similar, I guess you can say applications, but what's cool is that like Ableton's making it also easier to link these applications. So I'm excited to kind of dive deeper into this as well as with other people's, I guess you could say, different workflows and whatnot and implications. But hey
Yeah.
man, I appreciate your time and I love
Thank
you
you.
and we'll chat soon, my man.
Yeah, bro. Thanks for having me on. And I'm stoked about this new venture, The Void. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'll be in the group engaging and seeing what everybody else has to offer. I think it's a cool thing.
And is there anything you want to plug? Like any dates coming up, any social media, any links, anything, man.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can drop my link tree or something, which
You can add
has
all your links for sure.
it's got all my recorded works going back to like 2007 and all my socials and all that good stuff. So yeah, I mean, I've got a couple things coming up here in the end of the year. Be at Mercury Lounge with Peak on December 22nd.
New York City. Let's go.
City, exactly. I'm doing a run with the Escaper Boys in 2 weeks.
Very
Uh,
good,
and
dudes.
yeah, yeah. I think we're doing Burlington and Hartford, and yeah. Besides that, just closing out the end of the year here, and looking forward to 2025.
Excellent, man. Yeah, if you want to go see Kito B out on the road, you definitely can. He's always out there fucking grinding, banging the drums. My man, I will chat with you soon. I appreciate your time.
Well, brother, thanks.
Take it easy, bud.
Too, man.